Hello, I'm Paul Choiniere. I'm the editorial page editor of the Day newspaper, and I'm joined by Day staff writer Deb Straszheim, who covers the Groton for the Day newspaper. And today we're talking about the May 1st election in the city of Groton, where we're having an election both for mayor and for the city council. And we're joined by Harry Watson, the Republican candidate for mayor in that election. Hello, Harry. How you doing?
Thank you for asking me.
Glad to have you here. A little unusual that people see there's an election in May. You don't normally people associate the fall in November with elections. So, one, maybe if you could just talk about briefly, why does the city of Groton have an election in May, and what are you doing to try to make people aware of that? Because normally people aren't thinking about elections, and what's the challenge in making sure people get to the polls and participate?
Okay, why is it a May election? The city is formerly the borough. It's called the city. It was renamed, I believe, in the 60s. I think all borough elections and subdivision elections in the state of Connecticut happen in May. Stonington Village would be another example. I think there's a borough up in Jewett City, but that's just the way it's always been.
And how's that a challenge for a candidate such as yourself, and what are you doing to make people aware, there's an election, it's important to get out and vote?
Well, you do have to keep reminding people it's in May and not in November. The challenge is getting out and meeting people, knocking on doors, and trying to figure out different ways that you can get your message out and talk to people, meet people face to face as much as possible. Social media is pretty predominant nowadays. Mm-hmm. People are using that, and of course, it's telephones, and mostly getting out and knocking on doors and putting signs on lawns, those types of things.
Now, I know you've been active in politics and government in Groton for quite a few years, but for people maybe looking at the video and trying to find out some of the background, if you kind of briefly talk about your background and why you're running for mayor.
Okay, we're back to
Groton City.
Introductory remarks, I suppose you might say.
Right.
How's that?
That's right.
I've lived in Groton since 1983. I moved there as a single dad. And my beginnings in politics was 1989. I was asked to run for city council in a primary with Catherine Kolnaski. And a woman at Pfizer came down the hall and asked me if I'd like to run, and not knowing much about it, I said, sure. And she said, well, you have to change parties. Back in 1989, I changed from Republican to Democrat and ran in that primary and lost. And then I got appointed to planning and zoning in the city for a brief period of time. And I guess I got the attention of the Democrats, who I just joined the party in that year, and they asked me to run for town council in '89, and I lost. I think I finished 13th out of 18. And the next year, somebody resigned from the town council, and I was asked to take that spot in 1990. I took that spot, and in 1991, I ran again, and I finished 9th. So that was the beginning of my political involvement. And I said I was a Democrat at that point. In 1994, I switched back to being a Republican, and I've been a Republican ever since. I've been elected every 2 years on the town council till present day. I did serve as mayor from 2003 to 2009. I don't know how much more background you want. I've been involved with a ton of committees and, 10-year plan to end homelessness in southeastern Connecticut. I'm the president of the board at Lighthouse. I've been involved with shellfish. I was on the shellfish task force. I coached tons of kids. I have a second family. I have 3 children now. Just the last one just graduated from college.
Congratulations.
And I'm married to the chairperson of the Board of Education, my wife, Kim Watson.
So you mentioned that you had switched to Democrat and then back to Republican, and interestingly, Keith Hedrick, your opponent in this race, was a Republican who switched to Democrat recently. Was that a more comfortable fit for you policy-wise, the Republicans? Is that why you ended up back in that party?
I went back to what I was before I changed parties. And you're right, I looked just recently. My opponent has 4 years ago ran as a Republican, was elected to the city council as a Republican, and only been a Democrat for a short few years. I mean, I don't know, maybe 3. Yeah, no, I was a Republican, switched to run for an election, and it lasted a couple years back in the 90s, and I switched back to being a Republican again.
All right. Can I get into some policy issues in this particular election? When we talked to your opponent in the race, he seemed to sort of characterize the race as if you support his candidacy, you support the Democrats, they will continue to back the independence of the city of Groton, where he characterized it, if you support the Republicans, you're voting in favor of potential merger or some form of consolidation of the town and city governments. So I'd like to hear, is that a fair characterization, or how do you kind of characterize that issue?
I've been countering those comments, knocking on doors now for weeks. I am not for consolidating the town and the city. I believe what I offer is a good communication conduit between the city and the town, having been on one side and now to the other. It actually is frustrating to knock on a door, and one woman told me that that I was running for the town to take over Groton Utilities. I mean, that's the kind of comments that they're hearing at the door from my opponent's side. It couldn't be farther from the truth. I do want to work with the town and find some efficiencies and try to save some money, but also maintaining the quality of life. And the city's a great place to live. I've lived there for well over 20 years, and actually over 30 years. So no, I don't want to consolidate the town and the city of Groton. I do want to communicate. There seems to be, we've never had good communication between the city and the town. And I've been around for a long time, as you know. I'm hoping to be able to offer that. So.
Deb, if you could, I know you've been covering this issue of the city and the town. If you might
Sure.
that further.
You don't support consolidation. There's been a lot of discussion about duplicate departments between the city and the town, and the need to find efficiencies, as you said. So, what short of consolidation are there departments that you feel you could?
I can't start consolidation. The people have to start consolidation.
Right. But setting consolidation aside, are there areas where you feel that services could be combined, short of taking away to save money, short of taking away the city's independence?
I'm not sure combined is the same as sharing services. I mean, you know, if something needs to be done in the town and there happens to be an expert in the city that can do it, don't you think we should pick up the phone and say, hey, can you help us out doing this? You know, I don't, until you change the statute for highways, first of all, you're not going to do anything. And I mean, are you talking about having one police department in town, city?
Well,
or are you talking about?
I'm trying to sort of get a sense as to how you feel about various department services, whether there are areas where you think that, when you say shared, and what do you envision there?
I'll tell you one area that really, really needs to be shared and work together with is because we all win if we work on economic development together. Thames Street comes to light. I mean, drive down Thames Street and just imagine what it could be. We have if you want to go back in planning, and we have a planner in the city who is a great woman, she does a great job, but if you go back in history, 10 or 15 years ago, we used to offer planning to the city, and the mayor at the time decided it would be better if he hired his own planner and did that stuff himself. We have Paige Bronk, who works in the town, is just doing an awesome job of trying to bring economic development to the town. And the city's part of the town. I mean, like I said, we all win. If we develop Thames Street, the town wins, the city wins. But that's one area.
So that's an example.
An example, yeah. I mean, I've looked online, And there's a lot of waterfronts in this country that are working on redeveloping the waterfront. And New Bedford's one of those. Alexandria, Virginia is one of those. Buffalo is one of those. And they're all, Thames Street has so much potential. I mean, most of the people that drive to EB have to drive down Thames Street. The road's great now. We fixed the road, but it's full of dilapidated buildings, and it just could be a really nice place. Actually, I wrote down something. I got a quote from Alexandria with their redevelopment effort. They make it a vibrant, accessible waterfront for residents and tourists alike. And business people would benefit from that, especially small business people. Am I going on too long?
No,
No.
Okay.
not at all.
Do you have a follow-up to that, or?
Well, it was just sort of in the same vein as, so just the issue of the relationship between the city and the town. You feel that you could increase communication. How would you do that? Because there's so much tension between the two sides.
Well, there was a time that the city and the town used to have periodic meetings quarterly. We don't do that anymore. We have them occasionally, but they're usually contentious. And as part of that, one of the things that I'm hearing is people are saying, well, 30% of the tax base is in the city. We deserve you to give us more. And I don't like it looking at things in life like that. It's all one town. We're all educating our children. Let's say somebody lived in Mystic in a $600,000 house, 3 children in the school system. They certainly can't say my children deserve a better education in the school system because I pay more taxes than somebody living in a mobile home. That's the point that kind of frustrates me. We all need to think about all being in it together.
Where would you point to differences, if there are, between what your approach would be, city, vis-a-vis the town, versus what you see as your opponent's approach? Are there differences voters might consider?
I'm not sure what my opponent's approach is, and you've talked to him. He was here yesterday, from what I understand.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just saying that I have a lot of experience. I've been around for a long time, and I'm a easy to talk to person. I could see myself, if I got elected, trying to find efficiencies. I've already taken a ride in a police cruiser for a shift. I did that just as a citizen, but when I worked at Pfizer, when I managed at Pfizer, I always managed my walking around, was like what I called it. I got right into the laboratories with people working for me. That's not much different than hopping on the back of a sanitation truck and spending the day doing that and learning what they're doing. I'm not sure I answered your question, whether I talked around it.
You said his narrative that there was sort of a stark difference in that the Republicans could lead to consolidation and Democrats defend the independence was a false one. You said that, and you've heard it before, and you say it's not a fair. So I just wondering, maybe where the differences are and how things might play out differently depending on who got elected.
Well, the other false one is, that we went to arbitration on the highway budget,
Mm-hmm.
For the 16 budget, and the town council cut somewhere in the neighborhood of $800,000, and that. I have to remind people that council, back then, when that budget was cut, was a Democrat council. I was in a minority. That was a Democrat initiative to come up with a lane mile price and compare the prices. I mean, I was on the committee. I was the only Republican on the committee. There was 3 people from the town council, 3 people from the city council, and my opponent was one of those people. I don't know if he was a Republican or Democrat then, to be honest with you, but I could be wrong there. I think he was a Democrat. But that was led by a Democrat council in the town.
Did you oppose that? Or?
Oh, I voted for that.
You did vote for it?
Yes, I did.
And why was that, at the time?
You know what? I mean, it's part of our system. It played out through the system. We lost the arbitration. We gave them, what they had coming to them. And, that's just, doing what you do as far as you know, the majority of our council, myself, I was on the council then, voted for that cut, you know, and compared lane mile prices, and the arbitrator said, no, you have to give them the money. So we gave them the money. We lost. That's,
How about the, can I just interject?
Sure.
go ahead, Deb.
So what about the cut in, the recent cut in the police budget for the city? That was something that the town council supported, cutting the police department 7% for the coming fiscal year because of the financial pressures. How did you feel about that cut?
No.
Okay.
And so did another candidate on the town council for city council, Greg Grimm, also voted no. You know, that was a number that was on the table. You know, this year we did something that we really haven't done, and it was done right, is to sit down, first of all, for highways, and we had 3 city councilors, as the state statute says, and 3 town councilors, and they came up with an agreement as to what number was going to be proposed, which was different from their budget, and that passed through the council. I voted for that. The same thing, I think, happened for the police, where we gave the city direction, and they came back telling us this is what we think we should propose, and 3 numbers were on the table. You can only have 3 numbers on the table, and the last one is the one that passed. It was a 7% cut for the city, and I voted against it. And Greg and I were prepared to put another number up on the table, because once that one was, if it was voted down, was off the table, we could have put another number on the table, which was the number that was agreed to. So there's a misperception out there about that, and I think.
So the cut was too steep, you felt, and
Yeah.
One of the big assets for the city is certainly Groton Utilities, and
I knew we would get to this at some point.
Yeah. You would think a couple of issues. One is the sale of Thames Valley Communications, the sort of ill-fated cable effort that did not turn out to be a successful endeavor for the utilities. And there's been and the city. The Groton Utilities took on substantial debt, as a result of this selling that for sort of pennies on the dollar to basically unload it to the private sector. And there was a long dispute with at least one particular citizen trying to get more information on the background, the financial records. The FOI Commission, Freedom of Information, has said.
I think there's 2 citizens.
That was proprietary. Actually, 2 citizens was proprietary information. So were the citizens given adequate information on the background and the reasons why that was sold? Was there sufficient disclosure? How do you view that issue?
I think the jury's still out on that. I don't know. From what I have read, and I think I've read just a recent FOI ruling on that, is they said that somebody else has owned it since it was sold to them, and that information is all proprietary from when they owned it on. I think they're going back and looking at when Groton Utilities actually owned it for things like expense reports, and we lost a lot of money in that, and I think there was quite a few years that it was not represented in fiscal annual reports as to how much money we lost. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but it was millions of dollars.
Right.
And the city, I don't know the number the city's liable for. I've seen numbers, 27 million, 38 million. I don't know what that number is now, but you think about if the town wanted to consolidate with the city, why would they want to absorb that debt, and consolidate with the city? It's a huge debt. And then I know you're going to move on to what has been termed Derbygate, I suppose.
So before you get to that, so do you
Yep.
feel like that the information that's been released is enough?
No. I think that there's been a lot of resistance to let people know what really went on with TVC. I feel the same way with CMEC too.
Yeah, as you mentioned, the other issue is Groton Utilities is one of the co-owners of the Connecticut Municipal Electric Energy Cooperative,
Well, you got it right. That was good.
CMEC, that was disclosed that funds from CMEC were used to finance these lavish trips annually for the last 3 years to the Kentucky Derby, which
4 years, I think.
Came as a surprise to many of the local officials when they learned of it. There's an ethics complaint, I think, still going through the system in Groton. It sounded like you wanted to talk about that. What's some of the takeaways from that? How would you sort of view that going forward if you were elected mayor?
Well, I think that as far as the ethics complaint goes, I think that we're a little bit behind where Norwich has gotten to. At least that's the way I kind of read it. The part about not knowing about it bothers me a lot with us being a small community. It's happened for 4 years, and with Facebook, and I guess that's how some people learned about it. It kind of surprises me that the people that are in charge in the city did not know about it. And the other side of that is, if they didn't, I mean, shame on them for not knowing. That's on their watch, and that's, some of the people that work for them actually participated in this, and it was pretty lavish. It really was lavish. I mean, from what I've read, the golf retreats, there was some business, at least in Norwich, conducted, and they've kind of let that go in ethics. I think I read that this morning.
Yeah, it was a decision in Norwich on another trip where there was clearly business. There was business conducted, and the ethics board up in Norwich said they actually did some business there. The Derby, they could find no evidence that actually any sort of business was conducted.
Yeah, I'm not sure you need to take a private jet and do all those things.
Yeah, you could argue it was a bit
business.
excessive, certainly.
Yeah.
But that's that was the marker up there. But they couldn't even point to any business in.
If you look at the
Kentucky
people
Derby
that were
trips.
involved, I've done a little Facebook looking, and there's not very many pictures on those people's Facebook right now.
Yeah, but that does seem a difference between you and your opponent. Your opponent, we talked to him, felt that you really couldn't fault the Democratic administration because that was happening here separately on the Groton Utilities, and how could you blame the mayor and the Democrats?
The mayor's the chairman of the Utilities Commission. Come on. And she reports happenings and whatever going on to the council. My opponent was a deputy mayor. I mean, I have a hard time. I have a hard time with not making people accountable for things that happen on their watch. So.
Anything on Deb that you want to explore further? I got a few minutes, and then on that or some of the other issues facing the city. Not to put you on the spot.
No, that's
No,
okay.
I just about got all of what I predicted out there. I mean,
I think we've covered. Is there anything that we didn't ask about that you feel strongly that is a difference between you and your opponent that we missed?
I don't think so. I'm looking forward to watching both now to see how we mash up against each other. But no, I don't think so. I'm okay. I mean, like I said, I've just about got everything listed here I thought you were going to ask me about, and you've covered them all. So.
Kind of an overarching question, just so as we, as we sum up here, we get to the end of our discussion. Groton, facing potentially big budget cuts from the state of Connecticut. The governor's proposed, steep cuts in state aid. We don't know if the legislature, will follow that. So I was wondering how much you think of the fiscal pressure that Groton feeling is tied to this governor's proposal, and how much is just a Groton problem that spending has to be maybe brought under control a little more in Groton, collectively the city and the town.
Well, it is Groton's problem. We got singled out the most in the whole state of Connecticut.
So is it kind of a problem being imposed on Groton, or did sort of Groton Town and City already kind of have some spending issues they needed to do a better job on?
I think that both sides were doing a good job of keeping the mill rate stable. We're lucky to have a good grand list. However, it has gone down a little bit. The state budget cuts is mostly education side, if not all. And I have real problems with that. We have been talking to legislators, and I believe the pension side of it for the teachers is something that we haven't been promised, but it looks like that part of the
imposing some of the burden for paying the teachers' retirement on towns and cities is
right.
Is a proposal.
And we are meeting with the Board of Ed tomorrow night because we have, as a council, cut $5.2 million from their budget. And there again, I was on the opposing side for that also because I think that's just way too much. We don't know what the number is going to be from the state. And that's a problem that for 26 years has been the same. I mean, we work on our budget and try to predict what the state is going to give us for revenue. And then after we're done with our budget, we find out how much they're going to give us for revenue. It's a really, it's a backwards approach to doing things.
I know,
it's always been that way.
Problem.
It's a tough year. I think the council's goal, collectively, the town council's goal is to come back with a $1 bill increase, which I think that's the goal. I mean, you still have the RTM in the process. They have to look at the entire budget. Well, we are meeting with the Board of Ed again tomorrow.
Well, we thank you for coming in. People in the city of Groton, we hope they remember on Monday, May 1st, they have an opportunity to select who will be their leaders for mayor and the city council. And we urge them all to get out and vote. And again, thank you for coming in.
Thank you, and vote line B.